All right, everybody. Happy Tuesday. I'm Dr. Roney. Welcome to the Cancer Conversation. This week's Cancer Conversation is going to detail our blood work, right? Why we do it, what we do, how we do it, what we're looking for, trying to tie all the pieces together to individualize the care here as much as humanly possible. And then we're also going to go through a video. I did some live blood analysis today, and I want to touch on that. That's not going to be the full cancer conversation, but I do want to touch on it and give you the relevance of that, because I think that's a key cog in the initial evaluation process, and the ability to follow that up consistently to make sure that what we're seeing in the blood initially is changing with the modalities and the therapies that we're doing here. We're also going to have a guest on. Brian Barron is a guest from one of the labs that we use for natural killer cells. So natural killer cells are part of the immune system that's really vital for being able to fight the fight, if you will. So there's a lab value that we want to look at related to natural killer cells that his lab does. So he's going to be on for maybe as long as he needs, actually, to just highlight this lab, why it's different, and why we're going to, or why we use it, actually. So you're going to get that. And then Dr. Connealy and I will actually go step by step through the labs that we do. Let me put on my microphone. The labs that we do and why we do them, again, and the relevance of them. And the reality is the things that we try to do here are really trying to get away from the cookie cutter mentality, right? Where we're not just doing what everybody else would do with the same diagnosis. We're trying to do these labs that give us a better individualized comprehensive plan for you. So everybody's different. Even with the same chronic disease, we might treat 10 different people with the same chronic disease like cancer. We might treat each of them differently based on their different lab values that come back or lab work that comes back. And I think individualized medicine, we basically see that's the trend of the future because it makes too much sense. So, we'll go step by step. If you've been on before, welcome. If you haven't been on, I'll give you kind of the layout. I'll do a quick overview of our 4-pillar approach, why that plan, I believe firmly, is so important to care. It's like anything. It's risk management, right? If I have a really good, well thought out, comprehensive plan with a lot of detail, I'm going to have the best chance to heal, right? So that's what we want to make sure that we teach, because whether it's here or somewhere else, we want to make sure that you understand all these different things, modalities, IVs, things like that are available now with a lot of research to them that can help you significantly mitigate your downside and maximize your upside of healing. And the education part of this, or the information part of this, is critical to that process. And I think it helps. You hear me say this if you've been on before. I think one of the most important aspects of this is understanding that you have way more control than you're led to believe, say, in the conventional model, where the doctor's the superstar, you just follow the plan, and it's kind of one cause, one cure with, say, chemo, surgery, or radiation. And you, as the patient, don't really have much control. You just have to follow. Well, when we're looking at healing you from head to toe and trying to teach you and educate you on what you can do to help yourself, right? These different IVs, these different modalities, the things that you can do at home to increase your immune system, help your body detox, etc. You now have control over the outcome, where in the conventional model, there's very little control. So I think teaching that, right, with these cancer conversations allows you to have more and more control and more power. And with that knowledge and power, I think there's a better peace of mind through this entire process, right? So that the cancer conversations, if you haven't been on before, are designed to give you the power and to transfer the power back to you, as opposed to just relying on a doctor to try to heal you, right? And again, that's that head to toe approach. We have to figure out all these different things that are going to allow your cells to heal, right? And it's not just chemo and surgery or radiation that's going to be able to do that, okay? We have to oxygenate the cells. We have to increase the alkalinity of the cell. We have to increase the voltage of the cell. We have to starve the cancer. We have to kill the cancer. We have to address and fix causes. So tonight's episode is going to be revolved around this concept. You can't fix what you don't find. So always remember that, okay? So there's a couple different parts of treating a patient with any type of chronic disease, any type of symptom, etc. It's understanding where the symptom comes from. So think about cancer, which I believe firmly it's just a symptom. It's not a primary diagnosis. It's a byproduct of a lot of malfunction in the body, right? So if we think about it as it's not normal, it might be common, it's not normal, and it's a symptom, then we can go, okay, well, what created that symptom? And so when we talk about blood work, we're trying to find different things, especially in our 4-pillar approach. It's pillar 4, which I'll talk about in a second. We're trying to find causes as to what created inflammation in the body, which then created what they call free radicals, which then created oxidative stress at the cellular level. And with that oxidative stress at that cellular level, the cell becomes damaged and it loses oxygen, or it becomes more anaerobic, where it uses less oxygen, as opposed to aerobic, which a healthy cell uses more oxygen. Then because of the oxygen decrease, we get an increase in acidity, right? And then the voltage of the cell drops. So the byproduct of cancer, if you will, is bad cell function, which is created a lot of times by inflammation and a faulty immune system, which is then created by causes, right? Infections like bacteria, viruses, candida, mycotoxins in the form of fungal infections via mycotoxins. It could be heavy metals. It could be non-metal toxins. It could be stress, right? The stress response is significant in this process. It could be blood sugar imbalances. It could be hormonal imbalances. It could be EMFs. There's a lot more to it. But just to give you an idea, that's the list, if you will, and it's not complete, but it's the list of things that could have created this inflammatory process, which in turn creates, which Brian will get to, this imbalance in some of your immune system cells, natural killer cells being one of those. So these are the things, ladies and gentlemen, that we want to test. So the first part of a good clinician is knowing where to look, right? You can't fix what you don't find. So we have to know where to look. The second part is once we find it, right? Being able to find it's the second part. And then the third part is knowing what to do once you find some of these abnormal lab findings. What's the protocol? How do you clean it up, right? So in this integrative cancer world, we're not only looking to kill the cancer cells, right? We're looking to reestablish health of the cell, the human body, and the immune system. And then if we can do that, A, you get to heal much better now, but then B, you get a better chance of reoccurrence being very slim to none. And that's what we're trying to achieve, because in the conventional model, they're only looking to kill the cytotoxic effect or kill the cancer cell. They're not looking at all these other aspects. And blood testing and chemistry testing and urine testing and different tests that we offer at the clinic, which we'll go through, can help us find answers. Okay? And it's rarely linear, meaning we're not just finding something and then all of a sudden, okay, we just fix it. There's a lot of things that we look at collectively to paint a picture, right? So we could have one lab value that we'll talk about elevated, but the other 7 that we look at look clean. Well, then that lab value may be caused by something else not related to cancer. Could just be an infection, could be inflammation, something like that. But if you have 7 out of 7 high, then it's like, whoa, that's a red flag. We want to look at patterns and collective labs together to be able to come up with a quote unquote plan or path. Okay? So hopefully that makes sense. All right, so let me share the screen because I want to go through this concept of 4 pillars. And I know a lot of you, if you've been on, you've heard it a million times, but I think it's always relevant for new people or new potential cancer patients, family members, etc., to understand the plan that I feel works very, very well that you could follow, whether it's here or somewhere else. Of course, I think we do a great job here. We have very experienced doctors. Our benefit is that we have probably more tools under one roof than any clinic out there. And I think between the experience and the tools is where we win over most clinics. But I will say, and I'll be very unbiased with this, the plan that I'm about to go over, if you have cancer yourself or a chronic disease, or you know family, friends that have it, this is the plan that you want to make sure you're well aware of and they're well aware of. So my background, most of you know it if you've been on before. I have probably now 23 years of experience in everything functional medicine related. I started in the bio world, the sports medicine world, rehab world, chiro world, and then transitioned into the functional medicine world of cause versus effect, and then working with cancer patients because I have a vested interest in that via family experience, personal experience. So Dr. Connealy, you all know her. When she comes up, we'll talk a little bit more about her if you're not familiar, but she's the chief medical officer here. She's the owner. She's written multiple books, so she's like a rock star in the integrative cancer world. All right, just let me briefly touch on this. The 4 pillars. Pillar number 1 is and are the labs that we do, right? It's not just, or the diagnostics. It's not just MRIs and CAT scans and PET scans and just general blood work. We really want to get into more testing for you as the individual. RGCC, Garden 360, these are tests that test the circulating tumor cell activity, which are cells that cleave off the original tumor, circulate around in the blood, that could turn into something later. So we want to know about those because if they're elevated, part of our protocol is to bring those down so there's less chance of reoccurrence. You'll see things like nagalase. It's an enzyme that's secreted by the cancer cell that if it's elevated, it's going to cause the immune system to kind of be blocked from attacking the cancer cell. So it's a defense mechanism of the cancer cell. So if that's up, I think it's very relevant that we know about it so we can knock that down, thereby giving your immune system a better chance, right? So those are just 2 examples. There's dozens of more which we'll go over, but the point I'll make is we want to do more of our due diligence to get into the nitty-gritty so we can individualize your care more instead of just cookie cutter. This is where the individualized medicine part via the testing that we'll go over can help us. Pillar 2 is starve the cancer cell and kill the cancer cell, right? So starving it is the repurposed drugs or can be the repurposed drugs. Metformin being one of the most popular. It's designed to help with diabetes patients, but it also can help lower glucose, which then can help starve some of the, I'll use the term starve some of the cancer cells or the feeding of the cancer cells. So repurposed drugs are drugs that are used for one purpose in the medical community, but then can be used for anti-cancer. Okay, I'll keep it that simple. And then the kill phase could be everything from chemo, surgery, radiation. Here we do fractionated chemo, which is more of a lower dose chemo. We do that by bringing the blood sugar down, infusing chemo agents that are specific from the blood work that we do, that it might be specific to the DNA and the sensitivity of the DNA of those cancer cells. So that's more individualized. Blood sugar down, infuse the chemo agents. Because the blood sugar is down, it acts as almost a vacuum to the chemo. So it basically does the killing and the cytotoxic effect to those cells, but it leaves a lot of the surrounding cells intact. So it's a lower dose than the normal dose. It could be 10% of the normal dose. It could be 20%, but it's a lower dose and we can be more targeted with it. So that's another kill phase, if you will, or modality that could kill it is the low dose chemo. So we use that a lot here. Works really, really well in combination with some of the other things we'll talk about. Pillar 3 is going to be oxygenate, alkalize, charge, right? We talked about the biocharger and the mead, and we'll talk about that a little bit. And then the other one is supercharge the immune system, okay? So these chronic diseases like cancer are definitely a byproduct of a weakened immune system, a byproduct of lower than normal oxygen levels at the cellular level, and acidity. So we want to make sure that we change the cellular environment and boost the immune system as part of our plan, all right? And the final one is that voltage. The voltage of the cell is going to decrease when somebody has a chronic disease and it can't heal. So one of the things we do, we test it and then we work to increase the voltage. That's critical in the process as well. And then pillar 4, we already talked about it, are the causes, right? The bacteria, viral infections, the candida infections, the parasite infections. We talk about heavy metals and non-metal toxins. and mycotoxins from mold infections. Stress is a huge component in this process. Weakens the immune system, creates acidity, changes hormone levels. I mean, across the board, stress is just super detrimental. And most people that have some type of chronic disease is going to be related some degree to stress, okay? And then we get into blood sugar and thyroid and hormones, and we'll look at EMFs, the magnetic fields and how they change the polarity of the cells, etc. So Pillar 4 is all about the causes. The topic tonight is going to be specific to the labs that are going to help us get to that place, right? So I want to do something real quick because this was really interesting, which is the live blood cell analysis. So I did this morning, right? So basically, if you're not familiar, Teresa, who's been doing this for about 20 years, we're lucky to have her here. And right now she's seeing patients on a limited basis, but we're definitely going to expand. Especially after I did this, it opened my eyes quite a bit, and I got very excited about it. And I'll kind of walk you through briefly because we're going to do a larger cancer conversation on this. But essentially, they draw blood, she puts it on a slide, and she puts it under the microscope. So she's seeing this live. So I really want to just kind of hone you in on some things here. So this here, what you're seeing is part of the slides, and the initial part, I want to just go back a little bit because the first part of it was a little scary. These cells are red blood cells, and they're not normal looking. She said they're hemolyzed, which means they've kind of broken down. So there's reasons why they break down. So she's able to look at those and give me feedback on hemolyzed blood cells. Could be oxidative stress. It could be some things that I'm fighting, like infection, which I did have not too long ago, a viral infection, a head cold, chest cold type of thing. So she was seeing those, and that's a lot of the screen, right? So I'm thinking, okay, this isn't good. But then as she, let me take the caption out. As she goes through, then these cells here that you're seeing, they're healthy red blood cells. So you're seeing this, right? The healthy red blood cells, which is good. But then what she's looking at throughout the blood itself is what's going on in between the red blood cells. So let me kind of walk you through, not to get too wordy here, but I want to show you what she was showing me. And again, we're going to get deeper into this, but these are white blood cells, right? White blood cells that are attacking things in the screen. And let me give you a little bit more because there's some diagnosing that she did. These are platelet aggregations here, not good. Let me see here. Let's see. And again, we're going to go through this, but I just want to kind of give you some insight on, okay, so here, right? Here, these are cholesterol patches. Now, she said they could be a lot bigger, but this tells her that my liver might have, there was 3 or 4 things that pointed to my liver, just to give you FYI. So this is one of them. When you see cholesterol, it should be broken down. It shouldn't be in your bloodstream. So she said, hey, you're either not emulsifying fats properly or your liver's not working as well as it could be. So she gave me that analysis, but there was other things that she pointed to. Okay, this right here, if you can see, gang, this is a white blood cell engulfing. So in here, on my blood work, there were some fungi circulating around the blood, which she explained it's kind of abnormal because we should see fungi in the gut, right? But we shouldn't see it in the bloodstream. And we shouldn't see a ton in the gut because that's candida, right? So the likelihood that this is candida circulating around my bloodstream is not a good sign. She said it tells us that my gut was permeable. So the candida permeated through the gut into the bloodstream, and now it's circulating around the blood. And listen, fungi is not good for the human body. Matter of fact, there's a lot of evidence that cancer cells and fungi kind of go hand in hand. So woke me up a little bit, to be honest with you. And the great thing is you see it live. So she darkened it here. And this is the white blood cell that was engulfing one of the fungi, which was just fascinating to me. So And again, I know I'm going through this. Look at this. This is live. This is a white blood cell basically engulfing a foreign invader. Another one engulfing the fungi right there. So you see the good blood. These are the healthy blood cells, and then you see what's circulating in the extracellular environment here. This is something she said is abnormal. It's a double-headed something. It's a bacteria. Okay. So just to give you an idea, and then she takes basically 8 dabs of blood from the same speck and then looks at it and then can tell different things from those specks as well. So from this, even personally, right? And let me give you my mentality. I'm in this process of trying to make sure I stay well. So I eat really healthy. I do my workouts. I take my supplements. I do all that, and overall I do well. I have a lot of energy. Go to the gym. I work out consistently. I'm good. However, in this day and age, it's not enough. So I need to be more diligent in the sense that I need to figure out how, by doing tests like this, how my blood looks and what that could tell me. I did the Mead assessment, which tests the voltage of my cells. I did Molly's testing, the 3D body scan, as well as the bioimmune testing. And each of those tests pointed to the same areas, right? The liver area, there's some things going on there. So right away, I'm going to go do some extra blood work to make sure my liver enzymes are good and to make sure my gallbladder and such are good as far as no diseases, right? And then I'm going to do a liver flush, a pretty aggressive liver flush, and then I'm going to get on a detox, right? Or vice versa. I'm not sure how I'm going to do it yet. But when you do these different tests in this office and they point to the same thing, let me back up. What we could do is take that list that I gave you of all the causes, right, that are like this, and narrow the focus down as to priorities. So now I could go, okay, these are my priorities. The liver, I have fungus in the bloodstream, which means I probably have an overgrowth of candida in my gut. So I have to go and start working on those things. Now, the idea being, even though I feel good and I'm pretty healthy, if I don't correct these things, those things can cause more and more fuel to the fire, which is inflammation, which can mess up my immune system, to keep it simple, which can then weaken it or dysregulate it. Natural killer cells, Brian will talk about that. And then at the end of the day, I'm more susceptible to having a chronic disease. So even for me personally, what I see every day is the byproduct, which is the cancer. So for me personally, I'm trying to reverse that whole entire process, clean up the cell, clean up the inflammation, clean up the causes. And then all I'm doing, and if you've been around on these cancer conversations, you know how my brain works. I'm very analytical and I'm very detail and plan oriented. So if I do all these things by testing it properly and then using that data to my advantage, I give myself the best chance of not developing a chronic disease. And I think that's the future, right? Now, if you have cancer, we have to do the same thing. We have to clean up the cell, clean up the inflammation, and then we have to get rid of the causes, right? That's the answer. So again, the blood work and the live blood analysis and the Mead testing and Molly's testing and urine testing and all these different things that we do are complete to be able to heal the body from head to toe, to not only get rid of the cancer now, but to prevent it from reoccurring, right? Hopefully I made that point. I know it's 25 minutes of that point. And hopefully that at least resonated, and it gives you an idea step by step of the plan that needs to get done. So, okay, without further ado, I'm going to switch this. Let me see here if we get to the next slide. There we go. Okay, so Brian, I'm going to introduce Brian Barron. He's going to talk about natural killer cell function and the testing thereof. So Brian, without further ado, sorry for the delay, but I apologize.
Thank you so much, Dr. Roney, and it's a pleasure to be on. I appreciate the invitation to talk a little bit about natural killer cells. Before I do that, I'd like to introduce myself first. I am Brian Barron, as Dr. Roney mentioned. I am an account rep out of the Dallas area, so I'm smack dab in the middle of the country, and I represent Eurofins Viracor, which is a specialty laboratory out of Lenexa, Kansas, that conducts infectious disease, immunology, and allergy testing, specifically around the most complex complications, typically for the most immunosuppressed individuals that are post-transplant, etc. However, we do have specialty testing as well, such as our NK cell function, that helps provide a little more detailed information about what a patient is dealing with. So hopefully practitioners can have that information to better assess and then deal with that patient's health. So without further ado, our natural killer cell function assay is a very unique test in that it goes beyond the typical enumeration of how many natural killer cells are present in the body. What our assay actually does is looks at the patient's active or effective killer cells. And I'll get more into that in a second. But what do killer cells do? Dr. Roney did a great job of prefacing exactly what role they play in the immune system. And that is, of course, they are part of the body's innate system. The innate system is what we are born with that is essentially there and equipped to fight off any foreign substance, microbe, etc., without having any prior knowledge of that microbe or foreign substance. It does play a pivotal role in eliminating virally infected cells and tumor cells. So again, going back to what Dr. Roney mentioned, if there is a deficient number of proficient NK cells in the body, then there is a diminished ability to fight off virally infected cells and tumor cells and kill them. So once an NK cell is activated, meaning they recognize in the body there is a virally infected cell or a tumor cell, they release specific granules that kill the target cell. These granules, known as perforin and granzymes, very aptly named perforin, actually punch holes in the target cell membrane. By punching holes in the target cell membrane, they begin the cell killing process or apoptotic cascade, which ultimately eventually results in the destruction of those cells. Now, the other portion of NK cells along with this activity is that they release cytokines and chemokines, such as interferon gamma. Interferon gamma is a pivotal portion of the immune system's communication. So what natural killer cells do is they play a very critical role in the overall effective immune system by communicating with other cells to initiate the adaptive immune response. Adaptive immune response is what is cell-mediated immunity that our body develops to specifically fight off certain microbes such as CMV, EBV, etc. Those adaptive immune cells are then programmed specifically to attack that microbe, but without the natural killer cells to help direct that activity, they can sometimes get lost in the shuffle and be less effective. So I liken NK cells to somewhat of a conductor of an orchestra or a symphony. There are very talented musicians in that orchestra that know their job and know their job well, but without someone there to conduct them and properly orchestrate the entire process, it can be a less effective and diminished activity, so the music doesn't sound quite as good. Next cell, please. Sure. So the way our assay works is you take whole blood that contains PBMCs or peripheral blood mononuclear cells. NK cells are part of, they are part of the PBMC cell. So the assay will then look at specifically those NK cells' ability to lyse K562 cells. So I'm going to take a step back a little bit and go into more detail on that. What our assay does is it mixes PBMCs that are isolated from the peripheral blood, from the whole blood, by isolating these peripheral blood mononuclear cells to then mix them with fluorescently labeled K562 cells. K562 cells are cancer cells. Leukemia, for instance, is a K562 cell. And in that process, using flow cytometry, it measures at intervals of concentration the active NK cells' ability to lyse and destroy those K562 cells. So at various intervals of concentrations, and these are LU10, so lytic units of 10. In other words, one lytic unit is what's effective to destroy 10% of the cancer cells of the K562 cells. So if there is a diminished ability for those NK cells to destroy those K562 cells, that number will be low on that quantitative result. Because what the assay does is report exactly how many NK cells are effectively destroying those K562 cells. And in reporting in about 40 to 72 hours, this information is relatively fast and provided very quickly to practitioners so they can get ahead of that process and hopefully start some type of therapeutic to improve a patient's ability to produce effective NK cells. Next slide, please.
Sure. I mean, critical in the process of trying to get somebody better, right? In the most effective and timely manner.
Correct.
Right? So test, treat, retest, can consistently do some treatment and see if these things are getting better. And the fact that you said, what, 48 to 72 hours, Brian?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's great. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
And to that point, the biggest concern with diminished NK cells is not obviously the ability to fight virally infected or cancer cells, tumor cells, is that our body is consistently bombarded every day with various microbes and foreign substances, the air we breathe, the water we drink, the food we eat. So if we're already constantly dealing our innate immune system and an adaptive immune system specific to those antigens or those microbes, constantly dealing with this bombardment, if our NK cell function is diminished, you can only imagine the chaos internally that occurs when our immune system is not functioning properly at a very basic level.
Yeah.
So the necessity to get NK cells that are functioning up is crucial. And to Dr. Roney's point, when you have a baseline assessment to see where a patient's NK cells are at the first test, then that at least gives you an indication, is their NK cells looking good? Okay, let's go ahead and monitor, make sure they maintain that level, or even perhaps get a little better if it's very low. And I'll go more into the results right now to kind of discuss what that looks like. If they are deficient, well, then now you have, again, a baseline to hopefully assess, are they improving with therapeutics and NK cells that are functioning properly increasing over time. What that serial monitoring looks like obviously depends on the practitioner, but you do need some time. It can be anywhere from a month to a couple of months for immune systems to begin to show signs of improving. So on our report, as you can see, the very essential part of any live cell test like NK cells is that the sample received for testing has enough viable cells. Are those cells alive when they get to the lab? If you don't have live cells, you can't tell if they're effectively working. So our viability is about 90% at the very bottom cutoff. We need at least 90% of those cells that got to us to be alive in that sample. And the next extremely pivotal number is the actual number of NK cells that are functioning. In this particular report, the patient came in at 10.6. That is within the reference range of 8 to 53.6 lytic units per 10. However, with this report, even though they are within the range, they're at the very low part of the range. This can be indicative of the patient having difficulty maintaining healthy, functioning natural killer cells, or that they are currently dealing with an infection or cancer, or that their immune system has been extremely impacted by some other event that has unfortunately diminished their ability to properly perform, properly have adequately functioning NK cells. But the way
real quick is, could that be, and to you, Dr. Connealy, would a lower NK cell activity, right? Is that from chronic, all the things that we treat cause-wise? Could it be toxins and chemicals and infections and all that stuff, right?
Everything that is foreign coming into our body on a regular basis. Your natural killers are our first line of defense to go after these foreign agents.
So if we have too much of that stuff, these natural killer cells would just get weaker. It's like a boxer in the 15th round. Is that fair? Or is that right, Brian?
Yes, absolutely. Over time, the more we deal with, the more our bodies are, unfortunately, the ability to actually fight these off can decrease over time. I was in public health for 16 years, and infectious diseases is one of my backgrounds, working in public health for quite a bit of time here in Tarrant County in Fort Worth. And I likened the immune system to a coat of armor. And that armor is obviously extremely strong. While we're younger, that armor is even stronger. As we get older, that armor naturally with age gets weaker. The more it's hit, the weaker it gets. Yeah. If you keep pounding certain sections, well, then unfortunately that armor breaks down to the point where now you are at risk of being severely injured. Immune system is no different. Over time, the immune system will naturally weaken with age. And the more we're exposing our bodies to things, unfortunately, the weaker our immune systems get over time.
Yeah. Great information, because you see this and you're like, okay, yeah, the immune system is down. Now we have to figure out fairly quickly, right? If we're gonna turn this thing around, we need that immune system. So we have to get out of the way, get rid of the things that are bombarding it. Simply, absolutely. Right? Yeah, fair. Okay. You ready for the next slide, Doc? Or that correct? Yep. And that's, so there's support to that too. We'll get to, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. All right. So here's another one for you, Doc.
And in this report, again, viability is 92%, which shows that we did receive adequate number of live cells. The sample was good. However, this patient is at less than 1 LU10, so they are well below the reference range. This patient is severely immunocompromised, severely NK cell functioning cell deficient.
Okay. We have work to do, right? Right
Correct.
away. Okay. So, Brian, anything to add? I know there's only a few slides. I know Dr. Connealy wanted you to touch base, but do you have anything to add as far as the natural killer cells or that could help the audience?
Only that it is only one piece of the puzzle. Right. NK cells, although they are extremely important, per your prior mention, Dr. Roney, you need to look at multiple aspects of the patient's situation, of their clinical situation, to check to see what else is going on with them. Because although this is very important, it may not be the end-all, tell-all, but it is a very, very effective way to start to see where we are as a baseline on our.
Yeah, I agree. That's right. Fantastic.
Yeah. Well, in today's world, I think what we are seeing, and I don't know, you probably should talk about that, what we've been seeing, Brian, over now the last couple of years.
That's actually a very good point. We have unfortunately seen an increase in cancers that we weren't seeing before, especially among younger individuals, and an inability to fight off very basic infections that normally we would have no problem defending against or killing on our own, have become rampant and much more complicated. And we're not talking individuals who are in their 70s, 80s, 90s here. We're talking individuals who are in their 30s, 40s, who these types of cancers have not been seen before at this rate, which is indicative of either a situation where SARS has very much played a very pivotal role in this, where the immune system has unfortunately dealt with a virus that it has not been used to. And because it is a very unusual virus that unfortunately can change and cause a multitude of issues, the NK cells have become extremely taxed in the process of trying to keep SARS at bay, whether it be an individual who is post-infection or post-therapeutic. I don't like to call it a shot or a vaccine, I like to call it a therapeutic, have unfortunately seen a decreased or diminished NK cell function value, because SARS, and it is here to stay, has caused just a huge amount of issues physically for anyone that's pretty much everybody nowadays that is dealing with SARS.
And we've seen that.
Yeah.
You've said that for a year and a half, that there was a warranty. I'll kind of quote you, air quotes, right? That there used to be cancers that had a warranty, a 40, 50, 60-year warranty. Well, Dr. Connealy would say we don't see that warranty anymore. We're seeing those cancers in 20-year-olds, 25-year-olds, 30-year-olds, to your point, Brian. So you're reiterating what we're actually seeing in the clinic.
Yeah, and it's been in the last 2 years.
Right.
So
there's a high correlation.
Yeah. So because we didn't see, I mean, I've been doing this 37 years, and what we've seen in the last 2 years is very, very alarming. And it seemed, I know that we're not the only people seeing it,
right,
but we're the only people talking about it and trying to create this extreme awareness of, like, now we need to validate that we're healthy with all the different blood testing we do and all the other evaluations that we do. We're just living in a very different time.
Absolutely.
And we need to make everyone aware of this so they can take charge. Because, you know, when you're 30, you think, oh, I'm Superwoman, Superman. And we can't say that anymore.
Yeah.
And so we have to create, we need to inform and educate everyone on what the alarm bells and the 911 that's existing today. Because, for example, yesterday I talked to, as a follow-up, on one of my patients, and he is 35, and he came to see me for brain cancer, and he is a MRI technician. So I said, "Oh, how has work been?" And he goes, "Dr. Connealy, you would not believe the amount of new breast cancers in young people, the new lung cancers in young people that don't even smoke because of pollution." And so, and he has a brain tumor. Now he's doing way better now, but he has, brain cancer. And so, but he's able to work, and, he's managing it completely, transformed his lifestyle and everything.
But he's seeing it.
Yeah,
Even
but
his
he's
is where
seeing it in his front,
right,
in his
frontline view.
So anyway, so everyone's seeing it, but everyone needs to be talking about this so that patients can go to the doctor, and not just a regular doctor. Because my last patient, before I came up and joined this cancer conversation, she had been complaining for 1 year. It took her 1 year to get a diagnosis, which is something I would have worked up in 2 weeks.
Right.
We would have figured that out in 2 weeks. And an interesting comment, she came here, and she is an executive coach for hospitals, for executives in hospitals. She brought her oncologist the blood work I did. He goes, "I don't even know what this stuff means." And I'm like, "What?"
Yeah. Right.
Like, how can an oncologist be saying this? And he goes, she said to him, "Well, don't you want to know?"
Right.
So, I mean, that's not okay. If patients come in with something unusual that I may not have seen or know, I go look it up. Just like, how's this going to help us? So.
Well, think about this.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about Molly's testing. We talked about the live blood analysis. We talked about the need for the biocharger. We talked about, Brian, your lab testing on the natural killer cells. Look at just what that can do for us.
To inform you.
To inform you, and then actually start working on cleaning you up. Just those 4 things. We haven't even gone over the rest of the
blood
part
testing.
1 of the slides, and then part 2 that we'll do next time. So it's just, if we're looking everywhere, right? We have I know it's corny, but less chance of missing something, and a better chance of dotting every I and crossing every T. And I think, to both of your points, that's what it takes today.
That's what it takes today.
It takes it all.
That's what people don't understand, is you've got to now look at a patient different today than you did a couple of years ago.
Absolutely.
And that's what you're seeing, and that's what we're seeing, and we have to be the best researcher for the patient.
And educate, right? And that's why the cancer conversation's so good. So Brian, thanks for coming on. That was great.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Brian. I appreciate it. And we're going to be getting, just so for the people listening, we haven't even got all of our lab kits organized, but Brian's helping us get all that organized. So we'll let you know about that. We'll send out a mass email so we can get that all organized. Okay.
All right. Perfect.
All right. Thanks, you, Brian.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
All right, so I basically did the intro on a lot of, we did the live blood analysis.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Cool.
Dr. Connealy laughs at me because she's been telling me about it for a long time. I knew about it, but then I did it, just like I did the Tennant, when we did Dr. Tennant on, and I'm like, everybody has to do this. She's been saying that for months, so she almost like
I gave
jokingly,
him a hard time.
chokes me. And it's like, I've been telling you this for months, right? But then you see it, and you're just like,
Blown away.
Yeah. So anyway, we did cover a lot of that. So
yeah, so that's great. So just to kind of reiterate, because the patient asked me tonight, she goes, "Dr. Connealy, I don't know where I am." And I go, "Okay, well, let me explain to you how we figure out where you are." So I go, you have a biophysical part of your body, which is the external part and then any x-rays, CT scan, PET scans, MRIs that you get. So that's the biophysical part. Then the biochemical part is like here, what we're talking about right now, the CBC, the chemistry panel. So why is the CBC even important? Well, it's really important. It costs probably a couple of dollars to do, and it checks your white count. Your white count is how your body attacks things besides your natural killer cells, your white blood cells. So the next line of defense to attack, foreign invaders. And so when it's low, that means your immune system isn't good. So don't let any doctor tell you, oh, a white count of 3, that's okay. That's just the way you are. No, and no. Your white count is suppressed when there's a chronic infection. Then if your white count's elevated, like over 10, like if it's 11, 12, 13, that means you have another kind of infection, usually a bacterial infection. The low white count is with a chronic viral infection. So that's why we do an infection panel on patients when they have low white count. Then your hemoglobin delivers oxygen and nutrients to your cells. So your hemoglobin needs to be adequate. It needs to be normal. Chemotherapy can drop it. Anemia, losing blood, can cause it. Why is that important in cancer? Because if your hemoglobin's low, that means you have decreased oxygenation. Cancer is an anaerobic, low oxygen existence. And so then if you look at all the immune cells, your neutrophils, your monocytes, your lymphocytes, all of that is a picture of your immune system. So every doctor needs to know why those are high or low and then go about fixing them. So that's why that test is important. Then the comprehensive metabolic panel looks at your electrolytes. You got to have your electrolytes because that's what the cell bathes in. It bathes in a beautiful salt water. So we need to make sure that those electrolytes are good.
Sodium, potassium, calcium, things
chloride,
like that.
all that. And then you need your kidneys because your kidneys filter things out, right? So we got to make sure you're not in kidney failure. And a large percent of people as we age go into kidney failure. Well, it's very hard to regenerate kidneys. So that's why we want to make sure your EGFR is the estimated glomerular filtration rate. So that should be about 100. If you go look at your blood test, and Shep will send out a cheat sheet of your blood work. So if you're at home and you have a file of your blood test, we'll give a cheat sheet of what everything means. And then, but if you have kidney failure, early kidney failure, then that means you're not filtering out. And believe it or not, lots of people have early kidney failure. It's a growing. That's why they have dialysis units growing exponentially, because the doctors don't take care of the kidney failure. They don't give you what you need to do to repair your kidneys. Then the liver function. Your liver is an organ that is processing also everything you drink and eat or exposed to goes through your liver. That's why 35% of the population has fatty liver, because we're all inundated with hundreds and hundreds of toxins. You've heard me talk about the great poisoning. We are in the great poisoning. So 35% of the population has fatty liver. Now, interestingly enough, not everyone has to have abnormal liver function test to have fatty liver. And so they can have normal liver function stuff and still have fatty liver. So, but if you look at the range, you should be in the lower end of the range, not at the high end of the range. Then let's see, is that a next slide? A lipid panel, we look at cholesterol. If it's too low, we know that's a problem. And if your triglycerides are too high, we know that's a problem. So we look at that because all your hormones come from the proper cholesterol levels. So that's an important marker. Heart disease is sometimes, especially if you have high triglycerides, that can contribute to the picture of heart disease.
Based on the glucose, right?
Right. Now, your thyroid function test, thyroid is the battery to your body. So we do very complete thyroid blood test. And thyroid, if you don't have the proper thyroid, then you have higher risk of cancer. So low thyroid patients have higher risk of cancer. Why? Because thyroid is responsible for the metabolism of every cell in your body. It's the battery to every cell. So we got to make sure that the thyroid, there isn't an organ and cell that the thyroid doesn't work on. So we got to make sure we have proper thyroid functioning. And a lot of people have thyroid disorders. Thyroid disorders and thyroid cancer are very much on the rise. So that is something that properly needs to be assessed. Then vitamin D, we know that adequate vitamin D levels, vitamin D influences over 3,000 genes, upregulating or downregulating. You need to have, every patient should always, whether you have cancer or not, should be making sure that they have adequate vitamin D levels. Then iron studies. So if you don't have enough iron, then your hemoglobin and hematocrit are going to be low, and then your cells can't deliver oxygen and nutrients. Then if it's too high, what it's going to do, it's going to be inflammatory to all of your cells, and you're going to have higher brain storage in your brain, your liver, your heart. And so all of your organs are going to get stored with too much iron. So an ideal ferritin level should be around 50. And so when they check your blood, you should be checking your iron and your ferritin. It's very important because so many people today have elevated ferritin because their liver isn't working well. So when we look at ferritin, you want to make sure you don't have hemochromatosis, which is the inherited disorder of too much iron. And then you want to make sure that you don't have liver disease, because what happens is we will see a patient, they have elevated ferritin, and it's because their liver is not working great for them, because that's where all this is processed. Okay, hemoglobin A1C is a reflection of your sugar over 90 days. If your hemoglobin A1C is elevated, an ideal hemoglobin A1C is about 5.0. So Johns Hopkins did a study that everybody who had a hemoglobin A1C higher than 5.2 already, they found microscopic damage under the microscope. So actually they call it glycation. And there's something your body makes with high hemoglobin A1C. It's called AGEs, advanced glycation end products. Advanced glycation end products cause wrinkling, I call it wrinkling inside the body. So if you have a high hemoglobin A1C, you're aging rapidly. So that's why that's important. Also for cancer, you're predisposed to cancer because when your hemoglobin A1C is elevated, your cells are paralyzed in taking care of you.
A lot of the longevity experts, right, really focus on the blood sugar and the A1C because of that reason. Exactly. They know the damage that it does, so they actually may take metformin.
Yes,
right?
In fact, most of them do.
They do, so. Yeah, exactly, which is a blood sugar lowering
Yeah, it's a very old medication that lowers blood sugar. Now, I'm not telling you to go out and tell your doctor to give you metformin. I personally don't take metformin. I have taken it just as an experiment, just to see. But I don't take it now. I've been checking my hemoglobin A1C for probably 30 years. And, but we do give patients metformin, especially because it's one of the starving cancer drugs. Sometimes patients are diabetic and they have cancer now. So I tell them, look, I want to get it down right away. And so I take it case by case. It's an old drug, been around, like I said, for probably 70 years, a very long time. It was used in Europe way before it was used here in the United States. So it's a very old drug, has a good history. Yes, one complication is metabolic acidosis. Sometimes it's hard on patients' kidneys. I rarely see that, but it can happen. And so you have to be under the supervision of a physician when you do it. And there are natural things. Yeah, the natural version of metformin is berberine. Yeah. And so if you want to do berberine, that works. I always tell people, try to always go natural before you start using. And then you've got to look at what you're eating. Because if you're eating sugar, you're going to still have high sugar levels, okay? If you're eating a large carbohydrates, you're going to have more, elevated sugar. So you need to monitor what's going on with your intake. Now, C-reactive protein is the non-specific marker for inflammation in your body. Inflammation is the red light on the car dashboard that's telling you something is wrong. An ideal C-reactive protein is 0.5. So make sure that you have checked your C-reactive protein and you know what your hemoglobin A1C is, you know what your CRP, you should know what all these on anybody's blood test, with cancer, without cancer, to be healthy, just normal. That should be part of every doctor's workup. The CRP was on the front cover of Time and Newsweek over a dozen years ago. So everyone knows about it. And if your doctor doesn't know about it, be a strong advocate for yourself and tell him or her, I want these tests done. I know what they are. I know what they mean. And I need to know take care of myself. Comprehensive hormones. Hormones are the natural drugs to your body. In today's world, because we have so many chemicals that interrupt natural hormone function and production. So you need to have your hormones so that your body, the hormones can take care of you. Like I said, they're natural drugs that turn your body on and off and take care of you and influence everything from brain to liver to reproductive to and any organ in the body. It's affecting bone growth, everything. So your energy, your stamina, your longevity is all related to your hormones. So we need to properly do hormonal panels to make sure that you are where you are, because a lot of times now, just like we're seeing cancer in 30-year-olds, we're seeing hormone problems in 25 and 30-year-olds. So we need to be as proactive as possible.
Those cortisol levels are huge as well, because that's one of the stress hormones, your DHA, pregnenolone. Stress is just a major, major influencer on hormone imbalance as well. So that's what we're seeing like crazy.
Yes. And so cortisol causes increase in metastasis, increase in inflammation, increase in sugar, increase in all kinds of very unfavorable pathways in cancer.
Mm-hmm. So stress, to your point, stress, biggie.
Stress. Then food sensitivities. I always say that everyone should have a food allergy panel at least once in their life. And then they know what they can have. Now, the average person, theoretically, you shouldn't have any food allergies. If you have food allergies, there's probably your gut's not that great. But in today's world, because we live in a very imperfect world, that, we're going to have probably a couple of food sensitivities. But you shouldn't have 10 or 12 or 30 food sensitivities. If you do, that means your gut is destroyed and you need to rebuild your gut so you don't have, you do not have food allergies. And so, because I remember years ago, I had a patient, young girl, and she came to me and we did food allergies and there wasn't anything. And I said, oh gosh, we need to take care of your gut. In 3 months, we repaired her gut. The food allergy test came back very differently. Mm-hmm. So if you do food allergy, it's very important too, which food allergy testing. Of course, here at the clinic, we have the privilege of using lots of different tests from lots of different places. And over the years, I've kind of found out what is the best, most comprehensive testing. And so we know that. And there's no perfect food allergy testing. It's just, at least it's better than nothing. Mm-hmm.
And it's a big deal because if we're eating foods that we're sensitive to, really what it means, it's creating an immune reaction that's increasing inflammation in the body.
That is
that's
correct.
Really the inflammation. Would you agree that that's the root of inflammation? Is pretty much the root, right? Of all damage.
All damage.
Cellularly. So
yes.
It's
the precursor to all illnesses. Now, heavy metal testing. So it's not the heavy metal band. It's heavy metals that are in your body, like mercury, lead, cadmium, uranium, all antimony. All these are very, very deleterious to any patient, much less a cancer patient, because what do is they cause DNA gene toxicity. They actually interrupt with the gene and interfere with its replication. So it's very important that we, check those. And actually the patients who have actually done chelation fare better than on cancer patients fare better than the ones that haven't. That's a published study. So heavy metals, again, Dr. Roney says, there's so many things to check and evaluate, because that is just the way it is, the way the world is. There is no safe level of heavy metals in your body. None. Okay. You weren't born and designed to have mercury and lead and cadmium in your body. Okay. So we need to remove those. We have to today in this world detox every single day. Probably doing some kind of bath or sauna, and then taking something oral to detox our system on a regular basis, along with our proper eating and supplementation and all that enhance the whole cleansing process. And then people will say, oh no, your body's got a good liver, your body's got a good kidney. The problem is we're so overloaded that it can't do. Why do we have 35%? In my medical journals, they talk about fatty liver. I've been talking about fatty liver for a long time. And I'm like, oh my God, because we do ultrasound here. So I told John, I go, John, look at the fatty liver. Everybody's coming out with fatty liver. So I saw this long time ago. Now I get lectures and this, and then do drugs fix fatty liver? No, because
add to it.
The drugs all go through the liver. So it's very important to get your heavy metals. And another big source of heavy metals is MRIs, because MRIs have gadolinium, and gadolinium is very toxic. And all these metals bioaccumulate in your body. They're bioaccumulated and they stay there until you take some form of chelating agent.
And is that the contrast, Doc? Is that the contrast that you have to take? That has the gadolinium in it.
Correct.
So, and just for reference, so food sensitivity testing, heavy metals, organic acid test, that would fall into pillar 4, which are the causes, right? So a lot of the testing that we talked about will also look at the causes, but they're somewhat a little bit more specific to cancer and just overall health. These are getting into, hey, these are the fuels that could stimulate the inflammatory fire. So we really want to take a look at those. So just to give you a kind of a compartmentalized view of this, these are definitely in that pillar 4 of the causes. Fair?
That's correct.
Yeah. So, organic acid. That's a good one. From an or oxidative stress standpoint, can look at oxalates, can look at a lot of different things.
It can look for yeast, nutrition deficiency, free radicals. It's a very good comprehensive testing. Tells you a lot of underlying biochemistry that's going on or should not be going on. So. Genetic testing, now they pretty much do that on a lot of people to see if there's any kind of genetic, it's a saliva test. The name of the lab, I think, is called Invita. A lot of the patients, so like if you're BRCA1, BRCA2, do you have a predisposition to colon cancer or some kind of genetic variant? So usually that's already done to the patient by the time they get to us. So. Then tumor markers, most cancers, not all cancers, have tumor markers. So for like breast, you would do CA15-3 and CA27-29. And then if you have any kind of gastrointestinal, it's usually CEA. Now, I will tell you that these markers are not always evidentiary of cancer. There are patients who may have a cancer and their tumor markers are not elevated. They're done, but they're not something we 1000% rely on. I always tell people they are important to do, but they may not tell us this is, going to tell us anything. It's just sometimes patients have low tumor markers. And
an isolated test, right? However, say you had nagalase high, PHI, which we'll talk about high, D-dimer high, a cancer tumor marker high, all of a sudden, as a clinician, your eyebrow goes up, right?
Right.
So it's the patterns that are really as important as just these, or really more important than the individual test, would you say?
Right.
That's accurate? Yeah.
So anyway.
And then we went into the complete blood count,
right?
Because if somebody's doing, say, fractionated chemo here, each week
they get a blood test.
You get a complete blood count to make sure that the values are in range so you can tolerate the chemo. So we put those, same with the liver function test. We're constantly looking to make sure that you can tolerate these things.
Those are
kidney
the-
function, coagulation factors, same, right?
Right.
Electrolyte panels, they're your sodium, potassium, calcium. If they're way off, we have to look at those. Bone markers, touch on those real quick, Doc. If you don't
Yeah,
mind.
well, one thing that alkaline phosphatase, the ALP, so these are also, there's two different kinds of ALP elevations. One is liver and one is bone. So we'll actually order a fraction, what they call a fractionation, which is a separation, and say which one is liver, which one's bone. And so these are all good markers, because when patients have cancer and they have mets to their bone, but they also might have elevated from their liver. So we order these special tests to be done. Cardiac markers,
Yeah.
we'll talk about
Yeah,
that
immune
later.
function
Because
test.
we're going to have a part 2, because
Right.
we can't go through all the lab tests, you know. This is an important one. You can talk about this
Yeah,
one.
so NutriVal test, really good comprehensive test. It will look at antioxidant levels, which counteract what they call free radicals or oxidative stress. B vitamins, it will look at some of your vitamins and minerals like manganese and magnesium and zinc. It will look at your gut function. It will look at how your cells produce energy. It will look at how you methylate, how you detox, your omega balance. I mean, it's a 14-page test that really covers a lot of detail. This is one that could help from a supplement standpoint. We can get very detailed on what supplements that your body needs based on a test like this. This to me individualizes your care quite a bit. So we can look at it and say, okay, and on here, it's a little much. We'll go into this on part 2, but we could see if you're functioning really well within, say, oxidative stress or mitochondria function, how you're producing energy. And then if you're not, we can go and look at those pathways, see where they're breaking down, and see what nutrients you're deficient in that's causing that. So we can do this several ways to get better cellular function. You may just be short on or reduced levels of nutrients that help that function, right? Or you could have a lot of inflammation that's doing it. Or you could have a gut issue that's creating it. Or you could have, so it's our job as the clinician to go, okay, this might be one part of it, so we're going to give you these supplements to try to overcome the deficiencies. However, you could have 2 or 3 other factors going on that create that as well.
That's right.
So we can look at different aspects and be able to identify and fix, with maybe nutrient deficiencies being one of those. And this is a good test to do that.
Right.
So that's the NutriVal. Questions? Yeah. Okay, so let's jump into questions, because some of these we're going to do a part 2.
Yes.
And we'll get into heavy duty, maybe the causes, and we'll talk about nagalase.
Yeah, lots of other things.
Yeah, exactly. We have a lot for sure. Let's pull up the questions. Fair. Let me take off share here, and then you can see. There we go. Okay, so first one here, breast cancer now. MRI says a suspicious spot. What can she do? So breast cancer before, now.
Okay, so she needs to be completely evaluated. Hopefully she's had all these blood tests that I'm talking before.
Right.
Now. So you need to get with the doctor to order all these blood tests that I just talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Then the MRI is the gold standard. Now the next thing would be to do a biopsy.
Mm-hmm.
So they will probably want to do a MRI guided biopsy or an ultrasound guided biopsy. So, but do the blood test. Don't just, I see a lot of patients, they just order the scan. I'm like, well, where's all the blood work and all that?
You have to put all the patterning together,
exactly.
right? So if 3 or 4 things come back positive, you're like, ooh.
And then if she does a biopsy, we can send you what we recommend for all of our patients to do a biopsy. Why? Because a biopsy is an injurious inflammatory situation.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to reduce metastasis. So we can send out what we recommend for patients who do a biopsy.
And I think it's important too that, okay, if the biopsy came back positive, like think ahead. So you talk to the doctor. If the biopsy comes back positive, what's the next step? Say they said lumpectomy, right?
Right.
And you're okay with the lumpectomy, then the biopsy is done, and then within weeks you could have a lumpectomy.
Correct.
Meaning you're not seeding too long. You're doing things that that could prevent the seeding from happening, like Dr. Connealy said, but then you know the next step. So people get, I think, a little afraid of the biopsy. But if you know the next step and you've already done that due diligence, it's like, okay, I get the biopsy, it's positive, this is what I'm going to do.
Right.
So there's not much delay,
Exactly.
is the point I'm making. So,
yeah, but you want to prepare the mind and the body for all of this.
For sure. All right, all my typical cancer markers, CA, CA125, C-reactive protein, were in normal ranges with known metastatic CRC. Are there other labs to run, and what does that mean as far as cancer systemically in the body?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Okay. So you have a history of colorectal cancer. And so that means that you are in really good shape, but your immune system is not in good shape and your terrain is not in good shape. So because your body's working for you is what it tells me, but you've got all these other things that haven't been addressed. What is your other comprehensive? You didn't mention hemoglobin A1C, you didn't mention PHI, nagalase. You didn't talk about doing, like, do you have candida? Do you have parasites? Because when I think colorectal, I think most people have parasites, unfortunately, in this day and time.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I don't know if you have, what stage you are. So I would need some more, more pieces of the puzzle here to give you the best answer. Okay?
Yeah. And we didn't touch on RGCC or Garden,
Yeah,
which
right.
we'll have to touch on next time because that's the circulating tumor cell activity. How do you know if your cells are good?
You go look at the microscope. What Dr. Roney did. You look at your cells. You're looking. They prick your blood. They put it on a slide with the cover slip, and they look at it under the microscope. And I did this funny with my kids last week, and if you follow me online. And they were all about 30 years old. And it's interesting. All of them had kind of work to do.
Yeah.
And they were only about 30. So it shows you. But what was so fascinating is it got their attention, like it got Dr. Roney's attention.
Yeah, for sure.
And because it's your blood in the microscope, it's a live, beautiful picture of the beautiful machinery that's taking care of you every day.
Yeah. Yeah, when you see it too, if you're like me, or Dr. Connealy's like this too, when you see that, you're like, oh no, we're getting rid of that. I want to retest in a month, and I want to see that 10 times better, right? So, okay.
Exactly.
How do you get rid of the HPV virus?
Yeah, so that's a great question because HPV, there isn't any known medical treatment because when patients go to get their pap smears or if gentlemen have warts, vaginal warts, they really don't have any treatment. They do have some topical treatment. Like that. But the best thing that I have used over time is something called not essential detox. It is called essential detox.
Is it?
Yeah. It used to be called something else. It's made by American Nutraceuticals. You can get it here. Put that in the notes, Shep, to send them. So usually what I like to do is I give the patients a high dose for the first month, and I give them a lower dose the second month, a lower dose the third month. So you're going to have to take it for a year because HPV has been embedded in your tissue. So it's going to take about a year to eradicate that. So just so you know, 50% of head and neck cancers are related to HPV.
Yeah.
Rectal cancer is related to HPV.
Anal.
Ovarian cancer is related to HPV. So, and a lot of people have HPV. So probably in the young population, probably 80% of those people have HPV.
And gang, getting your immune system stronger
so you don't have
that natural killer cell activity
is a big thing.
And the product that I think we'll mention at the end that is helpful in increasing the natural killer cell activity, getting your system stronger and better is going to keep that, like, the head below water, if you will, which is the virus just staying controlled. Right. And that's any virus, by the way.
Yeah.
Will the test tell you how to treat what it finds?
No. Yeah. No, we will know how to. We know things that work.
Yeah. So that's the interpretation part. So you have to know where to look.
Yeah.
Then when you find it, then you have to know how to fix it. That's the challenge here at the clinic. It's a head to toe. We're not just, you have this, take this one drug or this one. We're looking at every cell in the body, trying to turn that around. That's the challenge here, right? Yes. But that's the study that we do every day. Breast cancer in 2020, 1A, lumpectomy and radiation. Oncologist does nothing to monitor me other than ask if I have any current symptoms. Is there a protocol that you offer that will help me gain my health post-cancer?
Yeah, great
sure.
question. We hear this all the time, Paula, all the time. So again, you need, like you said 2020, so here we are in 2023. So he or she should have been checking you with imaging, a breast ultrasound, or thermography and or mammogram, or all three is what I like. Your blood testing, like I just did. We didn't even talk about D-dimer. So I would do comprehensive blood testing on you, looking at your tumor marker, CRP, chemistry, CBC. And then I would highly encourage you to do bioenergetic testing that Molly does, that Dr. Roney already talked about. So that's how I can follow, because Molly she takes your acupuncture points, and every acupuncture point is like a wire or a string of pearls to an organ or gland. She looks for the interferences of those acupuncture meridians, but she also does something called the cancer cascade. The cancer cascade is a timeline. From one cancer cell to tumor is about 10 years. So if you had a lumpectomy and radiation, what year are you? Are you in year 8, 5, 2, 1? Well, that gives me a good idea. And that's something that I personally started doing on myself because the history I had of DES. And so that's how I personally got interested into it. And when I saw how accurate it was in my patient population, I went, oh my God, I have to do this.
Yeah.
So we've been doing it for about 25 years now.
And then we didn't get into it, but the circulating tumor cell activity.
Oh yes, and
is
you
a
need,
big
yes,
one.
very good.
Yeah.
So you need to have circulating tumor cells because that's responsible for 95% of metastasis. So you're maybe doing fine right now, but now you got to do these other things. Read my book. I write all about this in my book. That will help you elucidate, because, we're talking, and it's like a fire hose with us talking, and it can be overwhelming. So stay tuned with these cancer conversations, read our book, and just, read everything that we write about.
So the live blood cell analysis, the patient asked, is it, or the participant asked, is it normal to see activity of white blood cell phagocytosis in real time? For sure. Is it a snapshot in time after all? Our bodies are constantly fighting something, right? Or do you see such tests differently? No, that's accurate. What we're looking for, I pointed it out because I thought it was interesting that phagocytosis was going on against the fungi that I had in the blood. It was engulfing it.
Yes.
So I pointed that out. But yes, it's very, very normal. It's very typical. And what Teresa pointed out, which I didn't point out, is that we should see, say, one white blood cell per every 600 to 800 red blood cells. That's what she sees normal. So her testing is more, she uses the word, it's not quantitative, it's qualitative. And what she's looking at, yes, is an overall view of that ratio, say, but she's looking at the quality of the blood. So I couldn't find any scientific evidence for such tests when I did my research 3 years ago. Would be grateful for links to the scientific articles on this subject. I can get with Teresa on that because she's the 20-year expert. But I can tell you.
There's a great book written by Dr. Harvey Beagleson. And I don't know the name. He was an MD that did it, but he wrote a book on it. So go read Harvey Beagleson.
And the one thing in my blood was fungi. So she said, hey, listen, that should be it's in your gut. So it must have gotten through the gut wall, and now it's in the bloodstream. But when it becomes systemic, and I've read this years ago, that's not good, right?
Right.
Fungi systemically is not a good thing.
No, and there's a great book called The Yeast Connection that was written years ago. And I kind of read a review of The Yeast Connection just recently, a couple of weekends ago. But yeast are not good. Yeah, Beagleson's book is Holographic Blood.
So even if I got just that one thing out of the live blood analysis, that I have fungi in my bloodstream, I'm going after that aggressively. Right? That's because that's a cause to chronic disease.
Yeah. So,
there's many of them, but that's one of them.
Well, scientific evidence. Well, first of all, you're looking at your blood. That's what pathologists do, is they look at blood and tissue. So that is scientific evidence. Get the books that all the doctors learn, and that's your evidence. So.
Right. You don't want that bad stuff in there.
Um,
CLL, no cure. What can I do? White blood cell count is up to 95,000.
Well, so hopefully you're seeing an oncologist, number
Mhm.
one, because normally you can initiate chemotherapy as well as doing your collateral treatment protocol to change your terrain and
Mhm.
change all the things that we're talking about. So I had a former employee that had CLL. She did lots of experiments in the clinic with us, and so because she didn't want to do chemotherapy, and then
Right.
she finally did chemotherapy and eradicated it and has been healthy ever since.
Yeah, we had a patient not to interrupt, not too long ago that was doing great on our care. Honestly, got COVID, and his numbers spiked significantly. Had to go, went into the oncology world. They put him on a medication, and he did this stuff, and he's fine now.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
back to fine.
right, because COVID can
Mm-hmm.
completely deconstruct the system.
Mm-hmm.
It's unbelievable what I've seen with some of the patients. So
Nerve sheath tumor.
yeah, so it's a tumor on your nerve sheath, and so
Is it the myelin sheath?
Perineural. So it's around the tumor, and when it spreads cancer spreads in the localized areas, it can spread all over the body. So hopefully that you're getting the proper doctor and all that good stuff to address all that.
Can apoptosis potentially release aberrant or cancer cells into the body?
Well, apoptosis is programmed cancer cell death.
Mm-hmm.
So it is our natural mechanism that is allowing cancer to be killed. So your body knows how to take care of the garbage.
Mm-hmm.
It really does. As long as you take care of yourself so you don't have too much garbage.
Great question. Is it that the immune system decreases with age or toxic level builds over the years, weakening the immune system?
Both.
It's both.
It's both.
Yeah.
So one of the biggest things that affect our immune system is something called the thymus gland. And the thymus gland sits right here, okay? You have your thyroid that sits here in your neck, and the thymus sits below. And it starts involuting at the age of 21. Mm-hmm. So by the time you're 60, you've had a lot of decreased thymus activity. So like I personally take thymosin peptide every day because I'm 66. And so I take that for immune system insurance. Mm-hmm. And so if you have low white cells, you probably have immune system. But yes, we age because, it used to be said that people get cancer over 60. But because their immune system changes. So yes, our T cells, B cells, but also we are bioaccumulating more toxins today, more heavy metals, more stress, more everything that's suppressing our immune system. And you can tell that because a large part of the population is sick, and we shouldn't be sick with what we know.
I think the way I explain it to patients is as hormones, as we age, hormones go down, but which
affect the immune system.
They shouldn't do this. They should do this, right? It's a steady decline.
Right.
But no different than the immune system, it's a steady decline. But if you throw all these variables into the mix now, it can fall off a cliff. And then when the immune system just plummets because of that, now we're susceptible to disease, right? So I think that's a good. All right, so this is a good question. Are you seeing these cancers in the unvaxxed as well?
Yes.
We are because of COVID itself.
Yeah, because of COVID itself.
Yeah.
So
I think it's just it's doing a number on the immune system.
Yeah.
Right?
Correct.
Personally, that's what I was worried about because I got my butt kicked from COVID, which I'm shocked to this day, but I got a butt kicking, and reading everything that we've read. That's why I'm doing all these tests. I'm doing the EBU, and I'm doing the MEAD, and I'm doing Molly, and I'm doing live blood because I want to make sure that what I'm reading and seeing live from people that have had COVID doesn't happen to me personally, right? So I'm taking those extra steps that I never took before, out of necessity. Best way to diagnose cancer is through blood work first? ?
No.
All of it, right?
All of this. So if you let's pretend for a moment you don't have cancer and you want to know, how do I know if I have cancer? Mm-hmm. So you would do the comprehensive blood test. We didn't talk about the liquid biopsy, RGCC. So we would do that, and then we'd do bioenergetic testing, and we'd figure it out. That would take maybe a week or two to figure out. So in today's world, when cancer is about 40% of the population, we should be doing that like on every person now today.
No, I agree. And
So-
even your testings, your colonoscopies,
Yeah,
or maybe the blood
colonoscopy,
test that
mammogram,
can mimic it,
and pap smear,
MRIs,
but that's it.
Yeah,
But for a guy, there's no cancer screening except colonoscopy, Cologuard, and maybe a PSA. But other than that, you don't have any good testing. And a girl really doesn't have that much good testing other than a pap smear and a mammogram. But mammograms miss 50% of pathology, so you can't rely on mammograms. And first of all, why do we want to wait till we see it on a Cologuard, mammogram, PSA, or any other testing? We want to prevent cancer, not treat cancer.
Quick question for you, because I'm listening to all these longevity guys, right? Tony Robbins is big into this now and so forth. And they were talking about a test that's coming up real soon that is a early detector of a bunch of different
Gallery.
Is that
but it's not accurate.
It's not that good.
No,
That's the
I've
test
told
they're
them.
talking about. Okay,
It's not
all right. Fair.
It's not accurate. I've already done a
test.
couple of them.
Really,
and
no
it's
good.
Not, it's
Okay,
no. No one's come positive, and I'm like, but I know what you have.
Okay.
So
Okay.
So I'm always interested in any new test. So I always try it out because I'm always looking for the latest, greatest, best. But no, he writes about it in his book, Life Force.
You're right. I'm listening to that now.
Yeah, and so, but it's not accurate.
Okay,
And so
fair.
I've sent a message because, like, don't rely on that because
Okay.
it's not
Okay,
good.
good
So,
to know. Good to
yeah.
know. So there's look at that.
Oh, see,
Gallery
there we
test.
go. That was we
Right.
just answered our
Boy, oh
next
boy.
question. So I'd never rely on that. No,
Yeah.
not with what I know because I've already tried it. And so, but I know what we've been doing here is, with it's very
Yeah.
clear.
Yeah.
It's so amazing.
Right.
It's
Right.
like literally,
When you put all these things together, again, not to be redundant, but Molly's testing and live blood analysis and the Mead testing, and then you do the blood work, and then you do the circulating tumor cells, you're going to figure out something's not right.
Right.
It might not say this is cancer, but you would look at it like what I'm looking at and saying, okay, I have these precursor steps that could turn into something, even though I don't see it now. Let's get rid of it, right? So you just almost work to and assume, okay, this is the path we're seeing. Let's unravel it as best you can.
Right.
So normal natural killer cell level is there a threshold that is considered.
But we just went over that.
Right.
So we just went over that. If you missed the Mr. Barron's lecture on it,
Yep.
it was all right there. So, and we'll be having the test soon. We don't even have the tests yet. So we'll be getting those.
Now we're at 6:30.
Okay,
so what we'll
perfect.
do is we'll question wise like we always
if
do.
you can save them
Yep.
and everything.
Shep will
and I'll
save them and we will answer them. We will get to it for sure. So let me go back. I know there was a couple things. Let me share the screen again because I know there were a couple things that he wanted to go over. Let me drop this down.
Oh, yeah, and we'll update that tomorrow.
Oops, what'd I do? I messed something up. Good Lord.
Okay.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
All right, so I'll stop share. I think I just hit the wrong one. They shouldn't let me touch anything. All right. Anyway, okay. So nonetheless, so it's 6:30. We'll wrap it up, and basically, hopefully, with the completeness of what we were talking about, blood work wise, it gives you a good idea of at least the steps to take. Having said that, let me just go over briefly here for new patient inquiries because we get a lot of phone calls the next day. If you have active cancer, you're looking for prevention of reoccurrence, etc. The Cancer Center for Healing website is a really good resource. And then the number 949-867-6374. Vicki is our new patient coordinator. Her and Tracy are doing a phenomenal job. Very sweet. They'll help you answer questions, walk you through whatever that is you need. If you're just looking, some of you ask questions on what can I do to prevent. The center side, right, is where we do our wellness work. We could do all the blood work. We could do the workup. That's for somebody that doesn't have cancer, but they're looking to prevent it, like somebody like myself. That's 949-867-6419. Miles does a wonderful job of processing patients on that side. The supplement store, 949-997-0821, perfectlyhealthy.com. We have probably thousands of supplements in our store, online, that you can access at any time. And then the hyperbaric chamber is just one of the oxygen therapies that we have, 949-680-1904. And we'll talk about that in subsequent cancer conversations. So I would say maybe the next cancer conversation we do Bloodwork 2, right? Part 2.
We will be doing
because there's
part
so
2.
much more we need to get into.
So much more to talk about, which we will. We will answer your questions. I know several people say that we didn't, but we will get to your questions.
Mm-hmm.
But most importantly, we appreciate your partnership, because we do this for you, number one. We do this to educate and inform everyone possible. Now it's your job to go share all of your knowledge and all your understanding and everything you've learned with your family, your loved ones, and anyone else that wants to listen.
It's a movement.
It's a movement.
It's a movement.
And we're trying to awaken, all the people, because we don't need to be seeing what we're seeing today. We do not need to see this.
Yeah, a lot of people just don't know that this exists.
Exactly.
So our objective is to get the word out. So if you had to do chemo, surgery, radiation, and that's necessary at times, you have all these other tools in the toolbox to keep you healthy and strong and get healthy again, so you prevent reoccurrence and you can heal now. Okay? So, all right, gang.
Thank you,
have
guys.
a great week.
Thank you.
And we'll see you next time.
All right.
Much love.
Bye-bye.